Morning, CEP 200 students, and welcome to the Unit 5 and Unit 6 parts of the course. If you notice that your screen is, one color and you can't see me, that is intentional. I've not been feeling good the last couple of days. Have been waking up and taking COVID tests, so fortunately they have all come back negative. But I just have not had the energy to really make myself presentable. So this is kind of how we're going to roll with the Unit 5 and 6 videos. I hope that's okay. So, if you want to close out the screen and go follow through, in the unit materials as I talk, that's totally fine. But this is the part of the course that's pretty much the heaviest just because of the advocacy paper that is due. So last night, you should have submitted everything for Unit 3 and Unit 4. But Unit 5 and Unit 6 is really just winding things down. So in Unit 5, we're going to talk a little bit more about the creative counseling element to things. So these are going to be the counselors in the expressive arts, organizational counselors, and pastoral counselors. And then in Unit 6 is going to be counseling in schools and universities. So we're going to talk about school counselors and student services and college advising. So just to get started for the Unit 5. So you're going to watch the video, read Halkowski chapter 7, 9, and 10. You are going to watch the video on organizational counseling. You're going to read a supplemental article, complete the Unit 5 assignment, complete journal reflection number 3, and then complete quiz number 3. So there's going to be a question in your unit assignment that talks a little bit about organizational counseling. So I'm going to go through that in just a second. So with the counselors in the expressive arts, these are generally your creative arts counselors, your art therapists, and that kind of thing. So they use a number of different modalities that are more creative as opposed to just the traditional talk therapy. That's going to help people kind of be more open, kind of break down barriers, and just have different ways to kind of really just break things down in a counseling sense. Organizational counselors are very different. So organizational counselors are not your typical counseling professional. They don't use interventions and talk therapy to, really try to help work through things. But these people work more in an HR sense. So what they do is they work, with members in organizations to really figure out, what's up with employee retention? What do we need to do to make sure that employees are happy? They'll stay in their jobs, stuff like that. So really kind of working in the organizational sense of different corporations and companies and stuff. And then we have pastoral counselors. So these are your faith-based counselors. So a lot of people, a lot of feedback that I get at the end of every semester is wow, I had no idea that pastoral counselors were a thing. So they are very much a thing. They don't really get talked about as much in the traditional counseling side of things, but in churches and in religious structures and whatnot, they do very much exist. So you will learn all about those counseling professions in the materials for this week. So one of the things I want to talk about is the journal reflections. So for journal reflection number 3 is going to go along with the organizational counseling framework. So the question for Journal 3 is, what experiences have you encountered while working at a job that makes you wonder if any organizational counselor ever studied or evaluated it as an organization? What does your experience suggest about how and why certain work-related topics get selected to be researched or evaluated? So some feedback I have, received from people is they haven't ever actually had their first job yet, which is totally okay. So just think, relate this to school if you want to. Say you had a really negative experience in coursework, or, a friend or a family member came with, some complaints or just some like critical feedback for employers or something like that. So you can really use anything. I just want you to speak to either yours or someone else's experience to, organizational counseling and really just make sense of what that is. So that is good for that journal entry. Let's take a look at quiz 3 and see what answers we can really take a look at. So there's 2 questions on this quiz that I have noticed that people tend to have a little bit more difficulty with. And honestly, they're each worth 3 points. So this is good. You're getting a freebie 6 points for the quiz. So the question is, counselors in expressive arts may also be categorized as. This one's a little tricky because we're going straight from the material. So we do know them as creative therapists, expressive therapists, and art therapists. But from the text, the correct answer is recreational therapists. So I realized that this was a little tricky because we do know them as all of those other things, but we are going strictly by what's in the book. And the book does recognize them as recreational therapists. The other question is a little tricky too. So this one also comes from your book. So the question is, according to Halkowski, the average median income for pastoral counselors in 2016 was. So it gives you 3 different ranges. The actual answer is none of the above. And the reason why is because in the text, it refers to a salary, but not for the year that we're asking. And at the end of the chapter, it does say, there is not information that was able to be gathered about the median income for this counseling profession. So it's a little tricky again, so I recognize that, and that is also why I'm giving you the answer for that one. So you have 6 out of 25 points right there for you. If you have any other questions about any of these counseling professions, let me know. As far as I know, there are only a few master's programs that offer master's degrees in organizational counseling, because it is still a very kind of up and coming counseling profession. Pastoral counselors, I'm not entirely familiar with the requirements for as far as like licensure or certification, because I do wonder sometimes if like different churches have different requirements than what the state would. But for expressive and our counselors in the expressive arts, there is a special, master's degree, but also like specialization for creative arts and to be an art therapist. So while I did not go to school to be an arts therapist, that doesn't mean that I can't use interventions, especially if I'm working with children, to kind of help them be more expressive. Master's degrees and, primary focus in art therapy are much more, they have much more of a scope on the artistic elements of things. So that is not me, but I do use some interventions from creative arts in my own practice. So I hope that makes sense. So let's move on to Unit 6. So you're going to read chapters 12 and 13. You're going to watch a TED Talk by Kevin Briggs, complete journal reflection number 4, and then complete discussion board number 4. There is no unit assignment for this one. This is meant to be a little bit lighter on the coursework because you are finishing up your advocacy paper. So I think I misspoke at the beginning of the video. The advocacy paper isn't actually due until next week. But make sure you're doing it because it is due by the 24th. So one thing I do want to mention for Unit 6, there is the TED Talk, Kevin Briggs, The Bridge Between Suicide and Life. I do like to give a trigger warning for this just because it is about suicide. Kevin Briggs worked as essentially like a security guard on the Golden Gate Bridge, which, if anyone is familiar, is the bridge that, most people attempt to complete suicide off of each year. So he talks a little bit about his experience, basically trying to talk people down and build connection and keep people from feeling like that is what their last option is. So just to let you know, and then the discussion board number 4 is reflecting in this video. So you are just, kind of talking about what his main message is, what kind of feelings did it elicit for you, why do you think it's important that we talk about this? And so he also did quote, in my experience, it's not just the talking that you do, but the listening to understand, don't argue, blame, or tell the person how they feel, and reflecting on how you feel about that quote. So you will be doing that in your discussion board number 4. And as always, the reminders or the prompts are there, in the syllabus as well as in the discussion board area. So for journal reflection number 4, what you are going to talk about is, again, kind of assessing for suicide. So when we get people who come in, for therapy, one of the first things that we do in the first session is assess their risk for suicide. We call this lethality. So, are they currently feeling like they want to hurt themselves? Are they, have they had attempts in the past? What have these looked like? How often are they having these thoughts? It is a very, very detailed assessment just because, we want to make sure that we are taking good care of this person, offering them resources if they need a number for crisis services right away. Do they need an inpatient psychiatric stay or just like a psychiatric evaluation? Do they need medications? It's a very, very thorough assessment. And this is also kind of where that trauma-informed care comes in. We don't want to say anything that might trigger them. So one of the first things that we do is we do assess for lethality. So for journal question number 4, the question is, in the counseling professions, when we are assessing for risks of suicide or any other lethality such as self-injurious behaviors, we take a look at what are called risk factors. So what do you think is meant by risk factors, and what are some examples of these that people might have? So this is not included in the unit material. Do some research. So it's really, really easy to find, but yeah, go and find some examples of what risk factors might be for suicide. And, I know that this might be a really, really difficult topic for some people. I've had students who have been very vulnerable about their own struggles with their own lethality and thoughts of dying and self-injury, and do not feel like you need to at all share any of that with anyone. If it is too much, email me, let me know. But this is something that we do have to talk about just because this is something that is part of being a counselor in the counseling professions. And we see a lot of it in student advising or college counseling, if you will, where students are looking to get linked up with counselors at the university level through the university because the workload is just too much. And, even bullying is still very real. So there's a lot of things that we have to consider. And, suicide is something that, with college counseling in our counseling center, we do, kind of get familiar with, if you will. So let me know if it's too much, but this is, something that we do have to take a look at when you are in the counseling professions. And sometimes it's triggering for ourselves as well. But, we might find that we run into stuff like that quite frequently as counselors. So that all starts, today, the 16th, and it is all due by Sunday, the 22nd at 11:59 p.m. So just as a heads up, if you do need anything as far as questions for the assignments, please email me before the 22nd because I will be going to the football game. So I will not have access to my email on the 22nd. And then next unit, the conclusion unit, you'll just have a journal reflection and the advocacy paper due. So I probably won't do a unit video for that. Excuse me. So advocacy paper is due next Tuesday. So again, make sure that you are going through the old unit videos as far as expectations. There is information in the syllabus. There's a guide in the papers and projects section. There's also an example of the paper there for you. So I try to set it up nice and easy for you so you have literally everything that you need. So please let me know if you need anything before Sunday. But that is pretty much it. So really great job, everyone, with, really hunkering down and getting the assignments in. I've still continued to chip away at those, so I only have a few left to grade. But please let me know if you need anything, and I will make a post with your journal reflection on Monday. All right, take care, everyone. Be safe.